Now that we've set the stage for the United States in the years immediately following the American Revolution, let's take a look at our first government. Like I said in the first part of this lesson, the ultimate goal of the American Revolution was not only to overthrow the British government, it was to also replace it with a new form of government. And that new form of government that we chose was known as the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation were written by members of the Second Continental Congress in 1776, not long after the Declaration of Independence was signed. So as soon as we declare independence and begin claiming that we are now our own nation, we start working on our own government. The Second Continental Congress approved the Articles in November of 1777, but it's not until March of 1781 that the Articles are officially ratified. Now, what does ratified mean? It's just a fancy way of saying approved. So in order to officially approve the Articles of Confederation, all 13 states had to agree to them. And this took about 4 years. But finally, in March of 1781, the final 13th state, which I believe was Maryland, accepted this new government, and it officially became the government of the United States. Now, the Articles of Confederation, one thing to keep in mind is that this is not necessarily a constitution. This is more like an agreement of friendship. At this point in time, the United States are not necessarily thinking of themselves as a single nation. They think of themselves more like 13 separate little countries that are joined together as friends. So, under the Articles, the United States are more like friends rather than family, if that makes sense. You can choose your friends, but you're stuck with your family. Now, this government only has one branch, not three, not two, just one, and it is a legislature. Now, if you remember, a legislature is a group of lawmakers. And in this legislature, each state has one vote. Now, this is known as equal representation. Now, the idea of a legislature or a Congress, that's another name for a legislature. The idea of a Congress running the United States. If this sounds a little bit like the Second Continental Congress, it was. This is basically a continuation of the Second Continental Congress. The only difference is once the Articles of Confederation take effect, this becomes known as the Confederation Congress. Now, the Articles of Confederation, as you will see here very shortly, it had a lot of problems, but it did have a few accomplishments. The first accomplishment is going to be the Treaty of Paris. So you should remember the Treaty of Paris from the end of the American Revolution. It was signed by representatives of the United States and of Great Britain. Well, it was the Confederation Congress that sent those American negotiators to Paris in the first place. Men like Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and John Jay and others. Also, once the treaty was signed, it had to be ratified. It had to be approved. So it was sent back to the United States, and the Confederation Congress approved it. So you can give the Confederation Congress partial credit for ending the American War for Independence. Its greatest accomplishment is the Northwest Ordinance. Now, the Northwest Ordinance, in effect, sets up a system for creating new states. And this is a system that was eventually worked into the Constitution that we have today. Now, the Northwest Ordinance created a new territory known as the Northwest Territory. Imagine that. This is a map of the Northwest Territory. It's the area that's shaded here. And it's part of that territory that we received from Great Britain at the end of the American Revolution. Now, if you remember from the first part of this lesson, it wasn't clear what we were going to do with this new territory. And at first, many of the states actually started claiming parts of this territory. What the Northwest Ordinance says is, we are not going to do that. Any territory that we get, we are going to carve up into new states. So this sets a precedent that will be carried out throughout the rest of American history. Whenever we get new territory, we just turn it into new states. So this is where that idea begins. Eventually, in the Northwest Territory, it is carved up into 5 states: Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Something else that should probably be acknowledged about the Northwest Ordinance is it officially outlawed slavery in this new area. So the Northwest Territory is the area north of the Ohio River. So slavery is officially outlawed in this area. The Ohio River is this river right here. All right, so this is really the beginning of slavery dying off in the North. Slavery really still existed in many of these northern states. It was slowly starting to go away. You'll make no mistake, here in Pennsylvania, the Quakers had recently passed a law that would slowly get rid of slavery. It said that no new slaves could be brought into the state of Pennsylvania, and any children born to slaves had to be freed by a certain age. But this was really the first area in the United States that officially outlawed slavery. So this is really the beginning of slavery disappearing in the North. But most important thing to remember is this Northwest Ordinance sets up a system for creating new states. The requirements to make a new state is you need 5,000 people to create a territory, and you need 60,000 people to create a state. That doesn't sound like much. 60,000 people. It's very easy to find a city in the United States today that has more than 60,000 people. But in 1787, when this was created, there were only 4 million people in the entire United States. So 60,000 wasn't, it was more back then than it seems like it is now. All right, so that's the 2 main accomplishments of the Articles of Confederation. It ratified the Treaty of Paris, and it created the Northwest Ordinance. Let's talk about some weaknesses. So, there are plenty of weaknesses to discuss when we talk about the Articles of Confederation. 1, it had a very weak central government. For example, the national government of the United States under the Articles of Confederation could not raise taxes. It could not raise an army. It could not pass any kind of trade laws. But each state could. Each state could raise taxes. Each state could raise its own army. Now, why would they do that? Well, remember what I said. The United States views itself more like the European Union. They think of themselves as 13 separate little countries united together as friends. They do not think of themselves as a single country yet. But perhaps more important than that, these are people that have just fought a war against Great Britain, and they are afraid that if they create a powerful national government, then they might be setting someone up to become something just as bad, if not worse, than King George. Now, I like to tell my students, You can use the initials AOC for Articles of Confederation. And AOC can also stand for Afraid of Commitment. The story of the Articles of Confederation is just like a chick flick. The United States was hurt by its past relationship with King George, and it was afraid to commit to a new relationship, so it created a very weak national government. Another weakness, it's very difficult to pass laws under the Articles of Confederation. In order to pass a law, 9 out of 13 states had to vote yes. Now remember, in the Confederation Congress, there is equal representation. Each state gets 1 vote. And in order to create a law, it needs 9 votes out of 13. Now, this next point is a little inaccurate. It says difficult to amend. What it should say is impossible to amend. Now, what exactly does it mean to amend something? It means change, make changes to. So, it's important that you be able to make changes to your government if you think that's necessary. Well, in order to amend the Articles of Confederation, it was decided that it should require 13 out of 13 votes. Well, guess how many times all 13 states agreed on something? Never. The Articles of Confederation were never amended. The closest it ever came was, the amendment that was proposed was that the Articles, the Confederation Congress be given the power to raise some taxes, just very small taxes. Well, 12 states voted yes. 1 state voted no. And what was that 1 state? Rhode Island, the smallest of the 13 states, held up the other 12. So this is definitely a problem with the Articles.